Superman cares about everybody. He doesn't care whether you're rich or poor or where you come from. It was more like every comic was a wrestling match, and how can we make each issue more outrageous than the previous one? This didn't sit great with me personally, nor did it with Alex Ross. Alex and I were not interested in cynical characters and cynical, dark comics. I was interested in these characters as hopeful. I was interested in these characters as positive. I was interested in these characters as something you could look up to. And let's take a new look and a fresh look at what these characters bring to the table. That's what makes Superman Superman. Superman's greatest superpower is not that he can fly or that he can lift a car. It's that with the ability to do anything, take anything, have anything he wants, he's selfless beyond reason. He will never, ever put himself and his needs and his wants before anyone else's. That is an amazing superpower.
Man of Steel was directed by Zack Snyder, who presented a darker and more grounded version of Superman in a world filled with muted colors and stark lighting. At the same time, the film and other Snyder-centric DCU films cast the title hero with mythological, god-like imagery that did not resemble comic book images but rather epic paintings with static poses and even more harsh lighting. This became more prevalent in future DCU films such as Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Justice League, while Man of Steel was more grounded. This unique approach to Superman was supposed to make him more relevant and relatable to modern audiences. As to whether or not that worked is open for debate. Before Man of Steel, Superman was seen as a noble, larger-than-life do-gooder, as best personified by the Christopher Reeve Superman films of the 70s and 80s. Thanks to Reeve's classic performance, it was difficult to imagine the superhero in any other kind of light. Even Superman Returns, the last Superman film before Man of Steel, did not veer from the Reeve interpretation of Superman, which led to a lot of criticism in trying to make this version of Superman distinct from the traditional Boy Scout persona. It can be argued that Snyder veered too far from what made Superman so special. He is supposed to be a beacon of hope for humanity, which was ironic because he was actually an alien who grew up on Earth. Despite humanity's faults, Superman adopted the best traits of his adopted species and served as an exemplar for the promise of humanity. In Man of Steel, Superman, aka Clark Kent Henry Cavill, went through something of an identity crisis in an updated origin story. The film went through the typical Superman origin tropes with new twists. Superman's home planet Krypton was not the cold, crystalline, and sterile civilization seen in the Christopher Reeve films. The Krypton was a planet embroiled in civil strife, with a warring society that used what seemed to be technology based on a programmable matter, aka Brainiac. Superman's origin was more tied to that of his nemesis, General Zod, Michael Shannon, in that Zod was at odds with Superman. Father Jor-El Russell Crowe, with the planet dying, Jor-El sends his newborn son Kal-El to Earth to have a chance of a new life. Before Kal-El is sent, he is embedded with genetic material called the Codex, which will provide the genetic means to recreate the Kryptonian race on another world. After arriving on Earth, Kal-El is adopted by a human couple and grows up in a farm in Kansas. He struggles to fit in with society because of his developing superpowers, which he has to keep hidden. Once he reaches adulthood, Kal-El, who is now called Clark, sets out in the world to find himself and a purpose in life. During his journeys, Clark uses his powers to help people during emergencies, which was absolutely fantastic and absolutely beautifully displayed in Man of Steel. Eventually, he comes across the wreckage of a Kryptonian scout ship and activates an AI program that takes the image of Jor-El, who reveals to Clark his Kryptonian heritage. Under the guidance of the Jor-El AI, Clark learns to properly use his powers and adopts his famous Superman identity. Soon after, Zod and his army arrive on Earth and establishes first contact with humanity, with the demand that Superman be turned over to him. Zod earlier learned that Kal-El was implanted with the Codex and wants to retrieve it to rebuild Kryptonian civilization on Earth, which he plans to terraform. This creates an identity crisis for Superman as he is torn over siding with the human society he struggles to fit in with versus the Kryptonians who he knows are malevolent, which complicates Superman's decision in that once he was revealed to the world, he is immediately mistrusted by most of humanity who only see him as an alien threat. While Man of Steel lacks the light-hearted humor and heart of previous Superman films, it makes up for it with its grounded and frankly more honest approach to the comic book legend. This approach by Snyder and writer David Goyer turned out to be very, very divisive among the fan base. The world felt the full impact of superpowered beings as titanic battles between Superman and Zod decimated buildings. The special effects were simply jaw-dropping during these sequences, but the brutal nature of these battles and the more realistic depictions of collateral damage were too much for many in a post-9/11 world, especially since we did not see the casualties of the battles. This will be explored in more detail in Batman v Superman. Given all this, perhaps the most controversial moment in the film was when Superman was forced to kill Zod by snapping his neck. Many fans decried this event as they pointed out that Superman never kills. That is largely true in the comics. There have been instances where he was forced to kill his foes for the greater good, most notably Doomsday. In this situation, he faced a similar dilemma as Zod was trying to murder innocent bystanders and Superman had to act quickly. This action clearly devastated Superman, and it took the love of Lois Lane, Amy Adams, to help him recover. What a great scene that was too. Oh, so good. Actor Henry Cavill did an excellent job as Superman. In the film, he conveyed the inner conflict and confusion that his character felt, yet he was also able to exude a profound sense of decency and guarded optimism during his interactions with humanity. It was a shame that after this film, the actor was basically screwed by Warner Brothers because of how they treated the character in future DCEU films, to the point that he essentially disappeared. What was worse was the hopes of many fans, including Cavill himself, were crushed after he made a cameo appearance in last year's Black Adam, Flop Adam. Social media went crazy with announcements that Cavill was returning to play the Man of Steel, only to be screwed once again, dumped by the new head of the DCU, James Gunn. His plans are able to reboot the character as a younger superhero in Superman Legacy, which leaves Cavill out of the role. Again, super excited for Superman Legacy, but yeah, James Gunn didn't screw Henry Cavill. That was Warner Brothers. Man of Steel worked fine as a standalone Superman film. In fact, with its bold new take on Superman, it still is one of the best DCU films. Despite the outcry from fans from the older Superman films, Man of Steel won over the new converts as Cavill skillfully took over from Christopher Reeve as the new, more modern Man of Steel. While John Williams' classic score is missing, composer Hans Zimmer scored a stirring and just emotional theme. Strangely enough, the film is also a solid alien invasion film, complete with scenes of first contact, world reaction, and lots of destruction. It just happens to feature DC characters. Again, way too many DC characters. But as the launch pad for the larger DCU, there was much to be desired with this film. There was hardly any references to the outside DCU, which was fine, but Warner Brothers got impatient with their need to compete with Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU. This led them to hastily decide to clumsily shoehorn in DCU references into the would-be sequel Man of Steel. The result was Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which was wildly just hated on, shit on for its incoherent and tone-deaf script as it crammed in material to set up the Justice League film. Yeah, way too much material, bro. Just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? It really just screwed over Henry Cavill and the Superman franchise overall. Unfortunately, the DCU films that followed Man of Steel varied wildly in quality and tone. The result was that the DCU could not compete with the MCU, as many of its films performed either poorly or just adequately in the box office. Warner Brothers had to take action, which is why the DCU is being launched from the ashes of the DCU, which will end this year. Sadly, this means that the current version of Superman will be one of his casualties. However, despite the fact that Warner Brothers dropped the ball with one of their top-tier characters, at the very least, we got Man of Steel, which can be enjoyed for its refreshing take of this iconic superhero for anyone with an open mind. And that's why I've always said Man of Steel is an absolute masterpiece. Man of Steel, I thought that Zack Snyder did a tremendous job with Henry Cavill. I thought Henry Cavill I thought at the time was going to be our Superman for this generation. And I think this really was Zack Snyder's best movie. I think it really was. I think out of all the films that Zack Snyder directed, I think Man of Steel is his most competent. I think Man of Steel is his most just layered and just refined, and the direction and the godlike images and just giving us these awesome scenes that we've always read from comic books, and just being able to display it on the big screen. I think Man of Steel is an unsung hero, and it's really unfortunate that Warner Brothers, Zack Snyder, to a fault, a little bit, really just derailed Henry Cavill's future as Superman, and it led to the downfall of the DCU, especially with BVS. Like that movie just killed the entire DCU franchise and the cinematic universe, and it really is a shame, because Man of Steel deserved better, and Henry Cavill deserved much better. Truth out.
Excuse me, have to visit men's room.